One of the important things that we have to talk about first before we get into any content is safety. When dealing with equipment, there's a lot of trip hazards and other hazards in this studio that you need to be aware of. One of the first things is required in this studio is closed-toe shoes. The reason that we have you do this isn't because of fashion sense. It's really because we don't want something to happen to your feet, right? If a piece of camera falls, it can smash your feet as well as, in fact, sever a toe, and we aren't looking for that. So make sure that you're wearing closed-toe shoes whenever you are coming into the studio. As we are talking about shoes, the other major problem that we have is that there's usually cables all over the ground. The cameras are connected to the back in the TriCaster in the control room. You have microphones that are attached to the snake. And then there's other cables that might be light cables or electrical cables or all sorts of things. The studio, while being in use, especially with the studio lights, is usually dark. The house lights are off, which means you can't always see the things. So making sure that you are being aware of your surroundings, that you're looking down, as well as when you are laying the cables down, that you are in fact putting them in a neat way that somebody could actually navigate them in the dark. One of the things when you're working in studio is that you want to work with someone else, whether it be for lifting heavy objects, whether it be helping you with the ladder. There are many items in here that are really helpful, as well as it's just hard to operate a studio by yourself. So make sure that you're always coming in here with someone and to be able to help you and assist you in both safety and in production. When dealing with ladders, there have to be two of you. One of you will climb up the ladder. The other of you needs to stabilize the ladder at the bottom and use your body weight to kind of anchor the other side down. This is really important because our ladders go up very high. They go about 12 feet in the air. And so we want to make sure that there's a steady base so that the ladder doesn't tip. As you see, our ladder is almost 12 feet in the air. And one of the things that you need to be aware of is that the top two steps really aren't really meant for you to have weight on them. So make sure that you're using a stable base and don't hang or lean. Make sure that you're using the ladder to support you. You can always push your weight into the ladder, and so that way the ladder really is bracing you because you don't want to fall sideways or fall backwards when using the ladder. When you're outside in the field, there's a lot of things that you have to be aware of. Now, instead of being in a controlled environment, you're in a lot of uncontrolled environments. Safety is a major issue here because if you're not aware of your surroundings, and it's very easy for you to get wrapped up in what it is that you're doing with production, that you forget to keep an eye surrounding you. If you haven't seen, there are videos of cameramen and reporters who are out in the field who've been attacked. There was one that was actually murdered on air. These are all things, and people always have asked, well, why didn't they see it coming? Well, the thing is when you're looking into a camera and you're trying to do your job, you don't always recognize the things that are around you because you're focused on your job. So it's always important to have somebody who is aware of the surroundings if you think you're going to be that in depth. And of course, if you're by yourself, you should also be aware of what your surroundings are. Beyond just the kind of physical threat of another person, there are just tons of other things. There's animals. We live in an area where there are gators and snakes and ants and all sorts of things that bite, sting, and maim you. Those are all things that you need to be aware of. It wasn't more than a few years ago, there was a student here in production who went out and shot in one of the parks and got bit by an ant who they didn't know that they were allergic. And all of a sudden I get a phone call that says one of my students is in the hospital. We want to avoid those sorts of situations. So make sure that when you're outside, that you're actually looking at what's around you, what's the ground doing. Are there any dips or any holes that you need to be aware of? What is the wildlife doing in that sort of scenario? One of the other major things that we talk about when we're outside is electricity again. Electricity in the wires jumps 10 feet. So you need to be aware if you are using any sort of metal pole, especially if you're using a metal pole in air, as long as you are the the thing to the ground, the closest thing to the ground, because electricity always wants to get to the ground. If you become within 10 feet of a transmission wire, that can jump. Now, hopefully the wire is well insulated and that doesn't happen. However, over time, our infrastructure in this country is deteriorating, and that means that there are kind of frays and places where the electricity can jump. Once you get into the bigger kind of electricity where you can actually hear it hum, that can go out to jump more than 30 or 40 feet in the air. So you should avoid kind of the big towers that electricity passes through. So be aware of your surroundings. Make sure that you're looking up, making sure that you're looking down, making sure that you're looking all around yourself, because dangers can come at you from anywhere.
Now, the professional standard for audio is using an XLR cable. Now, an XLR cable is balanced because it has 3 pins. It has a positive, a negative, and a ground. Essentially, the positive and negative are the same signal reversed, phased by 180, which means that when it gets to the other end of the signal, it erases anything that's been added in the run of this thing, any noise. So as you're running through these, sometimes you have to cross power cables. And it's really important to understand how you cross these, because otherwise they will affect your video. And I'll show you that next. Like in Ghostbusters, the best way to handle power and audio is for the streams never to cross. But sometimes that's not possible. So what happens is, if you have an audio cord going this way and you have your power cord going on top of it, power always wants to go to the ground. And right now, the setup is that it's going to go to the ground through your wire. And so you'll hear a 60 hertz hum because power cycles at 60 hertz. So the way to avoid this, if you have to cross, is by putting the power cord on the ground, followed by putting the audio, the power cord on bottom and the audio on top. That way, the power goes to the ground and not up towards your audio cable.
If you're with gear and you are going to fall, protect the gear, right? This has happened to me multiple times, and it's something that you just have to get used to, because usually you are kind of a nice brace between you and the ground for cameras to survive or other equipment to survive, because they are really fragile. By no means does that mean sacrifice yourself for a camera, but when it comes to minor things, protect the camera. So when doing that, the way that you want to do that is you want to try to cradle the camera as close to you as possible and just kind of hold it and cradle it, and then kind of take the fall towards your shoulder or towards kind of the small of your back. Those are the easiest places to fall. Again, the idea is that you want to lessen the hard impact, right? So the more force that you have, the more damage you're going to do. So the more that you can rely on something where you're rolling, or that you can kind of have that kind of squash part, the squash will keep both you and the camera and equipment safe. Many times that I've done this, one of the times is, both of the times that come to mind are in sports. First is with football. I was running a great play, and I was downfield, and they passed to the wide receiver, and the wide receiver was coming straight down towards me, and he just kept getting bigger and bigger in my viewfinder, right? And then I just had to do the, because I have the whole big camera, and I just have to hold my hand out, and then that way, so when he came with me, I could brace with him, right? So my hand was touching him, and I walked backwards, right? So that way I could keep the camera in the shot, as well as not get run over by a wide receiver who just caught a ball and was going to get tackled by a defender. The other time I was in, it was women's basketball, and I was down underneath the basket, and it was a breakaway moment. So she was running towards me, the defender was coming the other way, and I was kind of the collision point. So literally I was sitting down, and I just had to literally hold the camera like this, and I rolled backwards. And by rolling backwards, I was able to protect the camera, which was a $50,000 camera. And outside of a couple pieces of plastic that broke, the camera was fine, I was fine, and then I recorded the rest of the game. So those are things that we look at when we're talking about safety. Make sure that you are safe when you are out filming.